you awaken to the haunting strains of flutes weaving through the vast, echoing chambers of marble. Their notes pierce the air like shards of ice, sharp, discordant, a melody that mocks the soul rather than soothe it. Torches gutter along the gleaming walls of the Palatine Palace, their flames casting elongated shadows that dance across the faces of senators in their togas, courtiers in silken finery, and soldiers rigid in their ranks. At the heart of this tableau, beneath a lavish canopy of gold-embroidered silk that shimmers like captured sunlight, presides the Emperor of Rome, Nero, Claudius Caesar, Augustus Germanicus. Yet on this fateful night in AD 67, Nero assumes a role far removed from the triumphant bridegroom of imperial law. His eyelids, darkened with kohl to accentuate their feverish gleam, fix upon a quivering form escorted forward by armored guards. The youth, scarce more than a boy, staggers on unsteady legs, his complexion ashen from terror and the fresh sting of wounds. A bridal veil of translucent silk drapes his slender frame, adhering awkwardly to shoulders that bear the weight of unspeakable alteration. This is no sacred union of Roman tradition. It is a perversion, a shadowed rite that twists matrimony into something profane. The boy, once known simply as Sporus, has endured a mutilation designed to preserve his youthful timbre, his unlined features, his form eternally poised on the precipice between innocence and oblivion. As the torches flare anew, casting erratic light across the assembly, Nero clasps the boy's hand and elevates it triumphantly, proclaiming to the riveted court his discovery of a consort reborn. Nervous laughter ripples through the throng, brittle as cracking porcelain. Others avert their gazes, cheeks flushed with shame or dread. None voices dissent. For this ceremony transcends mere eccentricity. It is a stark proclamation of dominion, a reminder of the fragility of existence under an emperor who defies the divine, the statutory, the inexorable gaze of posterity. The events of that evening, far from whispered fable, are etched in the reluctant chronicles of Suetonius, Cassius Dio, and their contemporaries, who recount the outrage with a tremor of revulsion. It marked one of the inaugural and most notorious instances wherein eunuchs castrated youths were ensnared as instruments in the emperor's capricious designs, and though this nuptial horror captivates the imagination, it heralded merely the onset of a lineage of atrocities, each sovereign extending the frontiers of barbarity, each revelation unveiling a profounder abyss in Rome's entanglement with authority and the sanctity of flesh. Before we descend further into these veiled chronicles of anguish and endurance, pause to consider the emperors who wielded such unchecked might. If explorations of the shadowed undercurrents of ancient realms stir your intellect, I invite you to subscribe and share your vantage point, be it from the bustling streets of New York or the tranquil hills of Tuscany. It is a delight to witness this fellowship of inquiry span epochs and continents. The chronicle of eunuchs beneath Roman emperors transcends isolated acts of savagery. It mirrors the corrosion of ethics under unbridled sovereignty. How forms could be refashioned into vessels of gratification, debasement, or allegory. Rome exalted its codices of justice, its hierarchies of discipline, its veneer of refinement. Yet within its pulsing core throbbed aberrations such as this: an emperor ensconced in the eternal city's sanctum, orchestrating a betrothal that derided venerable marital rights and the inviolability of the human vessel. To fathom the precipice of that AD 67 tableau, with Sporus ensnared as Nero's reluctant empress, demands a reckoning with the edifice Rome had erected around such souls. It was the zenith of the 1st century AD, when Rome's dominion sprawled from the arid expanses of Syria to the mist-shrouded woodlands of Britannia. The emperor transcended mere governance. He incarnated statute, a mortal conduit of the celestial. Publicly, Rome scorned the eunuch and the castrate as decadent imports from oriental courts, taints upon virile heritage. Privately, an undercurrent of intrigue persisted. Hellenic legacies had long permeated aristocratic villas, rendering eunuchs indispensable. Barren of progeny, they posed no threat to lineage or rivalry, deemed tractable, adaptable, eternally subordinate. And when sovereignty coalesced in a solitary figure, the emperor, the allure to sculpt existences into emblems of supremacy, proved an inexorable siren call. Nero's ascendancy was synonymous with histrionic excess. He envisioned himself not as conqueror, but as lyrist, thespian, a demigod of aesthetics. Yet paranoia gnawed at his edges, and voracious hungers consumed his nights. Sporus, the youth he selected for such irrevocable transformation, was no arbitrary quarry. Chroniclers attest that Nero discerned in the boy's visage an uncanny echo of his deceased consort, Poppaea Sabina, her demise shrouded in enigma, perhaps felled by Nero's own tempestuous hand in a paroxysm of ire. The lad's refined contours, his lithe silhouette, evoked her spectral allure. Thus, Nero commanded physicians to enact a prescription Rome's edicts expressly condemned: the emasculation of a free-born adolescent. The ordeal was rudimentary, nightmarish in its brutality. Absent the precision of subsequent eras' scalpels, the rite might entail mere excision of the testes or, in extremity, wholesale genital ablation, each variant fraught with perils of sepsis, cataclysmic hemorrhage, or swift dissolution. Sporus endured, by fortune or fortitude, we cannot divine. Perhaps the healer's cunning prevailed, or providence interceded. What endures in the annals is the inexorable verdict of his persistence, a existence eclipsing mortality in its torment. Post-ceremony, Nero exalted Sporus as imperial paramour, traversing Hellas and the Orient's provinces with the youth in tow, a pageant of imperial caprice. Ancient testimonials evoke Sporus accorded the rights of a sovereign spouse hailed as Sabina, born in a canopied litter aglitter with gems. This was no clandestine reverie. It was a public provocation, lampooning wedlock's sanctity, subverting Roman ideals of fortitude, consigning a child to perpetual emblem of autocratic excess. Yet the malice transcended Nero's idiosyncrasy. It was woven into the warp of performative polity. By flaunting Sporus, Nero broadcast defiance to adversaries. He could fabricate verity anew. A slain beloved revived? A vital youth would be hewn to her likeness. The patrician order compelled to genuflect before this travesty of heritage. They would accede. The realm bent to Nero's utterance. Sporus's odyssey, however, outlasted Nero's cataclysmic AD 68 demise. As the emperor toppled, compelled to self-slaughter by rebellion's tide, Sporus tumbled into the clutches of successive titans. Otho, the ephemeral successor, claimed him as intimate retainer. Vitellius followed, compounding the degradation by menacing a public tableau reenacting Persephone's mythic ravishment, a lurid desecration upon the stage. Confronted with this fresh subjugation, Sporus elected oblivion, severing his veins in quiet defiance rather than submit to yet another reconfiguration as plaything of the crown. His passing merits scant inscription in Rome's ledgers, yet it resounds with eloquence, survivor of scalpel, boudoir, and derision's chorus. He could not outlast the Republic's insatiable thirst for torment. Nero's transgression stood not solitary, but incendiary, illuminating the liberties of the unfettered sovereign. The youth's desecration, coerced union, and self-wrought end charted a somber trajectory emulated by posterity. Emperors would requisition eunuchs as confidants, instill dread via their spectral vigil. Commodus would choreograph arenas wherein altered youths served as macabre accoutrements. Elagabalus, in the 3rd century, would transmute emasculation into a perverse liturgical oblation, encircling himself with consecrated castrate acolytes in veneration of the Sol Invictus. Each iteration deepened the shadow, amplified the intricacy, interlaced with Rome's dramaturgy of dominion, and, invariably, the youth's forms paid the reckoning. The Palatine's marbled vaults did not hush with Nero's extinguishing. Rome cycled Caesars with the caprice of a dice-thrower's whim, yet the veracity for display and subjugation endured. The blade that scarred Sporus etched merely the inaugural gash. The lesion it inflicted upon Rome's ethical sinew festered unstaunched. By Domitian's tenure 2 decades hence, murmurs of eunuchs swelled within the court's labyrinthine whispers. Contrasting Nero's flamboyance, Domitian cloaked himself in austerity's mantle, proclaiming himself Jupiter incarnate, a stern arbiter of cosmic equity. Beneath this unyielding facade lurked an identical fixation on mastery, enacted in shadowed alcoves rather than floodlit forums. Suetonius depicts his domicile as a realm of trepidation. Senators quailed in his aura, domestics murmured inaudibly, kin passed utterances with forensic caution. Amid this miasma of suspicion, eunuchs emerged as dual-edged relics, implements, and icons. Domitian amassed them not as consorts, as Sporus had been coerced, but as wraiths evoking his prerogative to dismantle manhood at decree. In vision infiltrating one of his symposia. Opulent divans encircling an obsidian slab, lumens subdued to a sepulchral glimmer, and from the penumbras glide youths of porcelain pallor and falsetto hush. They glide spectrally, decanting vintages, proffering viands, voiceless as shades. Their essence proclaimed the sovereign's edict to divest not merely liberty, but essence itself. Cassius Dio portrays Domitian's malevolence as methodical, a savouring of senator's peril that progeny remained imperiled, domiciles permeable to edict. Anecdotes abound of scions abducted from senatorial hearths, irrevocably altered sans consent, repatriated as harbingers of descent's toll. Exaggerated by adversarial pens or not, their recurrence intimates veracity. For Domitian, the eunuch transcended utility. He embodied portent, attesting the sovereign's alchemy over creation. Rome vaunted its mos maiorum, ancestral ethos of rectitude, yet here an emperor brandished disdain for forebears incarnate in juvenescence. The barbarity permeated public spheres. Suetonius narrates mock skirmishes at his Alban villa, pitting dwarves and eunuchs in lethal farce with dulled armaments. Spectators bayed mirth as mangled frames faltered and hemorrhaged, agony alchemized to amusement, a burlesque of the gladiatorial rite, abasing humanity to freakish trinkets. Most unnerving is the eunuch's archival muteness, their treads glimpsed, silhouettes evoked, yet utterances evaporated. They manifest as jests, stage dressing in Domitian's phobia pageant, bereft of personhood, yet fishers admit glimmers. Martial, the satirist under his sway, alludes slyly in epigrams to eunuchs orbiting a potentate, veiling the emperor in innuendo. The barbs resonate, for the custom's notoriety preceded them. Plebeians grasped the palace teemed with youths sculpted to sate caprice. Domitian's AD 96 assassination bayoneted by courtiers elicited collective exhalation. Yet the archetype endured. Nero's flamboyance birthed it, Domitian entrenched it in dread, and lineage propagated it onward. The ensuing plunge into abyss arrived with Commodus, scion of Marcus Aurelius, inheriting in AD 180, where the sire epitomized stoic sagacity, tempered and contemplative. Commodus incarnated antithesis, a voluptuary glutted on viscera and vice, transmuting the palace into private colosseum. Donning gladiatorial panoply from inception, he envisioned the imperium as his proscenium. Eunuchs therein devolved to humiliation's chattels. Cassius Dio, senatorial eyewitness, chronicles with scarcely veiled abhorrence. Commodus marshaled cohorts of emasculated youths and adults, compelling arena debuts. Some pitted against beasts, others enacting lascivious myth burlesques. One vignette limns a eunuch costumed as Ganymede, the mythic Trojan, snatched by Zeus, thrust into feigned raptures under courtly scrutiny. The tableau's visceral assault overwhelms. Amphitheatre, reeking of perspiration and ichor, multitudes thundering as fledglings, swordless, are herded to fray. Their treble shrieks rebound off travertine. The emperor, resplendent in arena regalia, convulsed in glee, less potentate than ringmaster of perdition. Where Domitian wielded eunuchs as dread sigils, Commodus toyed with them as baubles, foregrounding disfigurement in lurid pageants. The Historia Augusta evokes his rapture in objection. Corridors lined with eunuchs enrobed femininely, compelling senators to traverse as through a bordello. Ganymede's recurrence evoked intent. To myth, steeped Romans, it broadcast Commodus as Zeus redivivus, divine entitlement, to seize and subvert. Beneath ovations lurked disquiet. Rome abhorred Levantine emasculation as effete savagery, yet imperial sanction muzzled remonstrance. The dissonance frayed Roman self-conception. Patricians grumbled sub rosa, annalists inscribed clandestinely, publicly acclaiming lest death summons arrive. Dio traces Commodus's spiral into lunacy and ferocity. Eunuch divertissements portended boundaries' dissolution if youths yielded to blade for sport. Senators, legions, plebs followed suit. Absolutism loomed, untrammeled, appalling. By AD 192's denouement, strangled mid-ablution Rome had weathered 12 years' despoilment, the metropolis fouled by carnage in forum and alcove. Eunuchs persisted, tacit testaments to Caesarian depredations. Yet Commodus marked no terminus. The vortex whirled onward, cresting in grotesque apotheosis a half-century hence under Elagabalus. Syrian-born, nurtured as Archierius of Elagabal, the unconquered son, this adolescent sovereign claimed the throne at 14 in AD 218, his interregnum to 222 a tempest of infamy. Amid Rome's scandalous diptychs, Elagabalus gleams aberrantly. Where Nero evoked the lost via scalpel, Domitian enforced via phantoms, Commodus parodied via farce, Elagabalus sacralized via liturgy, the Historia Augusta, bias notwithstanding, divulges lurid particulars. He compassed himself with emasculated juveniles not as minions, but co-liturgists in solar devotion. He aspired to supplant Capitoline pantheon with his Emerson idol, exalting it o'er Jove. Therein, emasculation transmuted to oblation. Picture ingress to his right. Sanctum swathed in carmine hangings, nard saturating ether, tympani reverberating off basalt. Shaven, altered youths sway entranced, proffering vitae as fealty's token. Central, Elagabalus, in aureate vestments, elevates limbs skyward, brow sheened, intonation rapturous, verging delirium, attendants recoil, transfixed in impotence. Dio alleges he pondered self-emasculation, emulating his deity's emasculate hierophants. Desisting, he ordained surrogates, mandating alteration as fealty's gauge. To patrician guardians of virility, this profaned not merely piety but Roman essence. Conquerors, patriarchs, immortals, unarrestable, he inundated the urbs with ceremonial debasement 4 years' span. Eunuchs ascended from chattel to hieratic icons of renovated cosmogony. Elagabalus's sovereignty germinated not in the Tiber's shadow, but beneath Emissa's merciless orb, where in AD 204 various Avitus Bassianus entered the world, yoked from infancy to Elagabal's beetile atop the citadel. Amid balmy haze and percussive fervor, his imperial ethos germinated, witnessing eunuch officiants whirl in theophanic frenzy, their forms consecrated via blade to transcend mortality. To them, severance was apotheosis, vitae bartered for divinity. Proclaimed imperator by legions in AD 218, he ferried this conflagration westward. Rome anticipated a neophyte Caesar, Augustan heir, capitulant to Senate and Jove. Instead, Elagabalus debarked with Elagabal's onyx meteorite and eunuch entourage. Herodian chronicles the ingress with stupefaction, processions threading vias, juveniles of treble pitch, unmarred visages, incarnating affront to virility. He stationed them not in sculleries, but ritual nexus ungwented, aureate, exalted as sacrosanct. Envision the Forum Romanum. Togate assembly, legionaries restive, plebs agape as the sovereign unveils the Emerson relic. Cymbals clash, fumigation cloys, temple gradines disgorge veiled, unshod eunuchs, intoning Semitic litanies. To traditionalists, the Orient devoured the caput mundi. This transcended pomp, it was Dominion's calculus, inverting Roman disdain eunuch flesh, erstwhile jest, enthroned in theophany. Dio excoriates Elagabalus's sequestration with catamites and eunuchs, shunning patrician counsel for puerile merriment. At Triclinia, they lounged adjacent, ochre-anointed, seric-swathed. Senatorial demurals elicited imperial derision. Rome's morrow inhered not in hoary senex, but solar juvenescence. Fascination deepened. The Historia Avers he interrogated chirurgeons on self-alteration, aspiring hierophantic androgyny. Recurringly attested, it indelibly weds his regency to the lancet mutilation as theatre, doctrine. The domus morphed to sanguinary oratory. Eunuchs, unoccluded, intoned the sovereign's abrogation of norms. Their adjacency murmured an unspeakable verity. If Caesarean corpus defied convention, so might the imperium. Sources bifurcate. Dio, traditionalist, discerns delirium. Herodian concedes zealotry, a stripling engulfed by nurture. The Historia accretes outrages, veridical or vaporous, yet eunuch fixation coheres. Contemplate the megalesia, Anatolian import. Romans abided galley self-laceration as esoterica. Elagabalus appropriated, inflating it. Jupiter abdicated for Emerson blade-bearer. Emasculation, peripheral anomaly, invaded piety's core. The rite appalled indurated burghers. Dio evokes juveniles gyrating to prostration, cicatrices rent afresh, vitae anointing mensa, ferrous reek entwined with myrrh, devotion's putrescence. Central, gemmed Elagabalus, ululates to Sol as if eviscerated. Modern exegetes posit Dio's amplification via ethical hysteria. Eunuch legions perhaps apocryphal, yet essence abides. This sovereign sacralized disfigurement as trope, tableau, Eucharist. Ramifications cascaded. Praetorians chafed at alien obsequies. Senators hissed imperium's unweaving. Matrons clutched offspring amid whispers of novitiates. Pivot transpired domestically. The Historia limbs serial nuptials, females, males, auriga Hierocles. In infamy, he espoused a comely lad, parading him veiled in Nero Sporus simulacrum. Blade ensured perennial puerility. Bridal panoply, spousal address, solar benison these echoed deliberately. Elagabalus claimed lineage not from Augustus, but boundary blurrers fusing drama and throne. Nero scandalized. Elagabalus dogmatized a regime of hallowed hewing. Restiveness burgeoned. Julia Maessa, grandmother and puppeteer of ascension, divined peril. Praetorian forbearance frayed per right. Senatorial loathing unconcealed. In AD 222, at 18, rupture erupted. Guards inundated the palace. Elagabalus, shrieking, hauled through erstwhile fragrant loggias. Eunuch guardians felled shielding him. The youth-sanctifying eunuchs perished amid them. Corpus profaned, processioned, Tiber flung. Regency consummated in gore, spectacle, voicelessness of reshaped lives. Yet terminus eluded, eunuch spectres stained like vintage. Posthumous Caesars imbibed precept. Corpus as armament, exhibit, mortification. Lust, phobia, farce, piety, all harnessed the emasculate youth in tenebrous codas. Beneath lurid senatorial screeds and historiographic prurience lurks subdued verity. These were juveniles, anonymized, muted, abridged to decadence's marginalia. Sans them, Caesarian saga incompletes. Sources tantalize. Suetonius, Dio, Herodian, Historia politicized. Jaundiced, embellish, sermonize, fabricate, yet diachronic accord intimate's kernel. Emasculation in Herod, casus falcion, thus crystallizes. Nero recreating via blade, Domitian terrorizing, Commodus mocking, theatricalizing, Elagabalus theologizing, each a nightmare's facet. Elagabalus's sanguinary close-effaced not eunuch icon. Caesar's decrying his surfeit orbited identical cruelty, spectacle, craving. The blade menaced juvenescence post. Tiber immersion. Temptation deems Elagabalus outlier adolescent, Levantine, theophanic. Yet imperial arc resists evasion. Rome long abided, fostered, youths refashioned to power's caprice. Witness Hadrian, predating by near century, lauded for pantheons, peregrinations, stabilization yet privately enthralled to Antinius. Uncut, per unanimity, the Ephebi embodied intact allure, yet his narrative unveils possession's kinematics. Emperor parading him imperially, beloved cum bauble. Antinous' enigmatic AD 130 Nile submersion ignited Hadrian's paroxysm. Deification, statuary in alabaster and A's, herbs rebaptized. Scandal sufficed youth apotheosed. Whispers likened to Nero Sporus, Domitian's wraiths, Commodus's parades. Caesarian yearning, marmoreal or hematic, invariably symbolized youth. Antinius, pristine, anchored spectrum's salubrious pole, veiled castrate, its nadir, both yoked by edict. Sovereign's proprietary over puerile corpus, moulding to phantasmic reflex. Posterity amplified. Christian polemicists scourged Roman turpitude via Sporus, Eunuchs, Elagabalian rites, pagan taint. Tertullian fulminated against boy unmanning for lechery. Lactantius indicted Caesar's nature. Mockery, divinity's profanation. Hyperbolic, yet anchoring Romanists' intimations. The lancet armatured the throne. Extramurally, echoes disseminated. Ludi innovated with altered pugilists, treble, voiced, glabrous, beast, baited. Audiences gawked at high warbles cleaving tumult. Satirists flayed plutocrats, hoarding eunuch thralls as trifles. Martial gibed a dotard on castrate minion. Liminal perversion. Hematic odor permeated not shrines alone, but arenaria. Picture Carthage, or Antioch Colosseum. Plebeian bellow, Saharan blaze, arena ingress by knife, scarred lad, wooden gladius clutched, mandated to divert. Treble ululations sheer din unnaturally. Throng cackles ecstatic, uneasy. Imperial loge overlooks, diverted not by triumph, but abasement. Commodus innovated, successors resuscitated. Caracalla's whispers, Parthian captives mock triumph humiliated. Diocletian's tardy 3rd century curia. Eunuchs gate-kept throne, corpus emblemizing apparat. Ammianus Marcellinus, 4th century, laments herbs eunuch swamped, their sway eclipsing senatorial, affront to manhood. Irony bites. Romans erstwhile derided Persian, Syrian eunuch, reliance. Tardily, Rome ungovernable sans them. Nero's phantasm, boy-templated systemic fixture, yet core compels. Youth's tales evaporate. They flit as umbrae, quips, attendants innominate. Sporus endures via spectacles glare. How myriad unchronicled, scalpel bleeding, right shrieking, arena perishing. Archaeology whispers, Roman catacomb ossuaries evince pelvic trauma consonant with antique emasculation, stunted statures, osseous frailty, endocrinal havoc. No gladiatorial pomp, subdued attestation of prepubescent alteration, nameless sepulchres, yet skeletal susurrus of blade. Quantities contest. Exegetes posit eunuchs as exotic import. Others, by Diocletianic, Constantinian epoch, palatial ubiquity. Indubitable. Caesar's precedents. Nero visibilized, Domitian weaponized phobia, Commodus mythologized farce, Elagabalus hallowed, heirs appropriated. Their atrocities sensorium fragments evoke. Nocturnal domus, argand flares stuttering, eunuchs padding flagstone, silent. Theatrum with Olympian scrims, juveniles as Ganymede Persephone, quavering under mandate. Templum, timpani throbbing, suffumigation asphyxiating, blade glinting Pyrrhic as vitae altar, splashes. Ubiquitus semiotics, corpus fractured, recast, paradead. Caesar's deemed deific via boy unmaking Nero, resurrecting Sabina in Sporus. Domitian senatorial, phobing via processions. Commodus myth, parodying. Elagabalus cult, elevating. Imperium assimilated, eunuchs powers cogs. Yet archives betray insurgency subtle, circuitous, palpable. Dio's abhorrence transcends polity, visceral shudder at eye-witnessed. Suetonius's arch tales, Martial's incisive hexameters, patristic anathemas all evince disquiet, these corpus inspired. Rome proclaimed eternitas, juridical bastion yet Caesars erected cruelty's auditorium, puerile forms attesting naught custom, physis, humanity resisted throne's fiat. Thus arc extends. Post-Nero Domitian Commodus Elagabalus, tardive imperium elevates eunuchs from quarry to quidnuncs. Constantinian cortege eunuch, counselled inaugural Christian potentate. Procopius limbs, Byzantine halls, eunuch hegemonized arcana, phalanges, thesauri, cruelty's inception bureaucratized. Yet robed substructure, unaltered, preandric boy, edict, sculpted. From Sporus's inaugural wail in Neronian alcove to Constantinopolitan eunuch ministers' sibilance, filament unsevered, Rome discerned precociously mutilate utility as paramour, trope, factotum, hierophant. Sovereignty's famished never desisted exploitation. Boys' hush wounds profoundest. Surviving, Caesarian, senatorial, vatic, sacerdotal diction spectating, scorning, execrating, rationalizing. Juveniles margin shadows, nominatively effaced, existences anecdote condensed. Yet orally attuned through historic fissures, echoes persist. Lancet, preludial gasp, arena, agony yelp, rite, prayer lisp, sepulchral osseous mutter. Not mere Caesarian saga these unmaking boys' narratives, overwritten by Roman titans concupiscence, trepidation, vaulting. Palace pyres yet sputter imaginatively. Nero clasping veiled, trembling Sporus. Domitian banquet, reclining, eunuch, umbrageous. Commodus arena, bellowing as altered juveniles myth, mime. Elagabalus sun-gesturing amid Templar vitae cascade. Distant, marble medallioned, scroll dust-bound yet history vitalizes respiring, Romaic precepts unentombed. Past potentates rationalized savagery via theophany, aesthetics, ancestral pretext boy symbolizing, objectifying, spectacle tooling. Overtly before togate, loricate, civic assembly cheered or tacit, we posit such relics to antiquity's sepia. Blade, Pyrrhic, coerced obsequies, interred with Tiber, cast Caesars. Yet sovereignty perennial in juvenility's pursuit, controlling, fracturing, refashioning, unextinguished across millennia. No Roman genitor deemed offspring invulnerable to Caesarean glance. Contemporaneous guardians err in presuming impregnability. Exploitation morphs new guises, lexicons, apparatuses. Templic palatial once, now opulent domain occluded, coterie veiled, systemic, anonymous. Not despair's toxin, but alertness's reveille. History mirrors not solely retrospectively admonitory. Romaic boys' desecrations, transtemporal whisper. Untrammeled might, mutism of frailty, spectacle, eyes' atrocity. Sporus, innominates hush as yests, oblation, unvolitional amorous reverberates. Unheeding, sepulchring beneath thenness complacence, hazards Romaic myopia's reprise, blinding to overt imperial acts. Let these chronicles perturb repose, acuity honed to innocence's predacity when dissent mutes. Romaic palace flares extinguished eons past, yet umbrae elongate presently.